The Christmas ham that changed everything. Posted in r/relationship advice by you/broken at Christmas. I don't even know where to start with this. I'm sitting in my car in a McDonald's parking lot at 11 p.m. on Christmas night, and my entire world just fell apart. I need to get this out before I lose my mind completely. This morning started like every Christmas for the past 15 years. Mom was in the kitchen by 6 a.m. fussing over the ham she'd been glazing since yesterday. Dad was in his recliner pretending to watch the news but really just dozing off every few minutes. The smell of cinnamon rolls filled the house and everything felt normal, safe, like home always did. I should have known something was wrong when my brother Jake showed up with that briefcase. Jake's always been the golden child, 3 years older than me, MBA from Wharton, works for some big law firm downtown. Mom and Dad have been singing his praises since he could walk. Jake's so responsible, they'd say. Jake's so successful. Jake's going to take care of us when we're old. Meanwhile, I'm the disappointment. The one who went to community college, who works as a pharmacy technician, who's still renting an apartment at 32 because I can't afford a house. But I never resented him for it. Not really. He was my big brother. He taught me how to ride a bike, helped me with my homework, scared away bullies in middle school. We weren't super close as adults. He was always too busy with work, but I thought we were good. I thought we were family. God, I was so stupid. The morning went fine. We exchanged gifts. I got Dad a new fishing rod he'd been eyeing, Mom a cookbook she'd mentioned wanting. Jake gave them both expensive wine and got me a gift card to Amazon. Didn't know what you'd want, he said, with that awkward smile he gets when he's being lazy about something. I gave him a framed photo of us as kids, building a snowman in the backyard. He barely glanced at it before setting it aside. Mom called us to dinner, around 2. The dining room looked beautiful. She'd used the good china, the one with the tiny roses that belonged to her mother. The Christmas ham sat in the center of the table like a centerpiece, perfectly glazed and studded with cloves. Dad was already reaching for the carving knife when Mom swatted his hand away. "Let me do it properly," she said, laughing. "You always hack it up like you're chopping firewood." That's when Jake cleared his throat. "Actually, before we eat," he said, reaching for that briefcase beside his chair. "There's something I need to discuss with everyone." The way he said it made my stomach drop. It was his lawyer voice, formal, detached, like he was addressing a client instead of his family. Mom paused with the carving fork halfway to the ham. "Can't it wait until after dinner?" Dad asked. "The food's getting cold." "No," Jake said firmly. "It can't wait." He opened the briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of papers, legal documents from what I could see. My hands started to shake, though I didn't know why yet. "As you all know," Jake began, "Mom and Dad have been talking about their estate planning, about what happens to the house, their assets, when they're gone." Mom set down the carving fork completely. "Jake, what are you—" "Let me finish," he interrupted, and there was something sharp in his voice I'd never heard before. After extensive discussion with Mom and Dad, and with their full consent and blessing, I've taken steps to ensure this family's future financial security. He pulled out the top document and slid it across the table toward me. I stared at it, but the legal language might as well have been hieroglyphics. Property deed, transfer of ownership, my name was nowhere on it. "What is this?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Jake looked directly at me, and his expression was completely cold, businesslike. "As of last Friday, ownership of this house has been transferred to me. Mom and Dad signed over the deed." The world tilted. I heard Mom gasp, but it sounded far away, like she was underwater. "What do you mean transferred to you?" I managed to ask. "I mean the house is mine now. Legally, officially." He gestured around the dining room like he was showing off a new car. All of it. The house, the land, everything. Dad was staring at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "Jake, son, I thought this was for tax purposes. You said—" He cut him off. "I said it would protect the family's assets, and it will. This way, when you two are gone, There won't be any messy probate battles, no fighting over inheritance. Everything will already be settled. But what about Sarah? Mom whispered, looking at me with these huge, confused eyes. Jake finally looked at me again, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Not just coldness, active dislike. I was a problem he'd been waiting to solve. Sarah, he said, and my name sounded dirty in his mouth, needs to understand that this family can't carry dead weight forever. The words hit me like a physical blow. Dead weight. That's what I was to my own brother. Jake! Mom's voice was sharp now, angry. That's your sister. That's my 32-year-old sister who's never owned property, never built any equity, never made any real money. He was looking directly at me now. He'd been saving this speech for years. Sarah, you've been living paycheck to paycheck your entire adult life. You have no savings, no investments, no retirement plan. If something happened to Mom and Dad tomorrow, you'd be screwed. We all know it. My face was burning. Everything he was saying was true, and that made it worse. So what are you saying? I asked, though my voice came out smaller than I wanted. I'm saying that I'm the only one in this family who's actually financially responsible. I'm the one who can maintain this property, pay the taxes, handle the upkeep. I'm the one Mom and Dad can depend on to take care of them as they get older. He leaned back in his chair like he'd just solved a complex equation. This house needs to be in the hands of someone who can actually afford to keep it. But it's our family home, I said weakly. And it still is. Nothing has to change. Mom and Dad can live here as long as they want. You can visit whenever you want. But legally, officially, it belongs to someone who can actually be responsible for it. I looked at my parents. Dad was still staring at the papers, his face pale. Mom was looking back and forth between Jake and me like she couldn't believe what was happening. You didn't tell us Sarah wouldn't... Mom started. I told you exactly what I told you, Jake said firmly. That I was taking care of the estate planning, that I was making sure this family would be financially secure. Sarah being left out was implied in that conversation. No, it wasn't. Dad's voice was louder now, angry. You said you were handling the paperwork. You didn't say you were cutting out your sister. Because I knew you'd get emotional about it, just like you're doing now. This isn't about emotions. It's about practical reality. Sarah can't afford to inherit half of a house she can't maintain. She'd end up having to sell her portion anyway. And then where would you two be? The room went completely quiet except for the sound of my mom's quiet crying. I felt like I was drowning. So, what happens now? I asked. Jake looked at me like I was being deliberately dense. Now, nothing changes in the short term. Mom and Dad live here. You visit. Life goes on. But when they're gone, this house will be mine, free and clear, with no complications. And me? You figure out your own life, like an adult. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Not just what he was doing, but how he was doing it. On Christmas, at the dinner table, with Mom's perfect ham sitting there getting cold, while my entire future crumbled around me. I need some air, I said, standing up so fast my chair fell backward. I stumbled toward the front door, barely able to see through the tears. Behind me, I heard Dad's voice, loud and angry. Jake, what the hell have you done? And Jake, calm as anything. I've secured this family's future. I sat in my car for 2 hours. 2 hours in the driveway of the house I grew up in, the house I'd always assumed would be part mine someday, watching my family through the front window as they argued. I could see Jake gesturing with his hands, probably explaining why he was right. I could see Dad pacing back and forth. I could see Mom crying into her napkin. Finally, Jake came outside. He walked up to my car window and tapped on the glass. When I rolled it down, his expression was softer. Not kind, exactly, but not as cold as before. Sarah, I need you to understand something. This isn't personal. This is business. It feels pretty personal, I managed to say. I know it does. But think about it rationally for a minute. He leaned against my car like we were having a casual conversation. What would happen if Mom and Dad left you half this house? You'd inherit a property worth $400,000, but you'd owe $200,000 in property taxes and maintenance costs you can't afford. You'd be forced to sell. Then what? You'd get maybe $150,000 after fees and taxes, which sounds like a lot, but won't last long. Meanwhile, Mom and Dad would have lost their home for nothing. I hated that part of what he was saying made sense. But this way, he continued, the house stays in the family. Mom and Dad get to live here until they die, and when that happens, I'll take care of everything. The property taxes, the maintenance, all of it. No stress for them, no financial burden for you. But what about me, though? What do I get? You get to not be responsible for something you can't handle, he said simply. You get to visit your family home whenever you want without worrying about mortgage payments or property taxes or roof repairs. You get freedom. That's not freedom, Jake. That's being cut out. He sighed like I was being unreasonable. Sarah, you're 32 years old. You make $38,000 a year. You have $1,200 in your checking account and maybe $3,000 in savings. You drive a car that's 15 years old and live in a one-bedroom apartment you can barely afford. These aren't judgments. They're facts. Each fact felt like a slap in the face because they were all true. And now you're telling me I don't deserve to inherit my parents' house because I'm not rich enough. I'm telling you that you inheriting half this house would destroy you financially and accomplish nothing for anyone. His voice was getting impatient now. But instead of looking at this logically, you're making it about emotions and fairness and all that bullshit. It's not bullshit, Jake. This is our family. Exactly. It's our family, which is why I'm making sure our parents are taken care of and this house stays in the family instead of getting sold off to strangers because you couldn't afford the upkeep. I wanted to argue with him, but I couldn't, because buried under all the hurt and betrayal was the terrible knowledge that he was probably right. I couldn't afford half of a house like this. I'd never been good with money, never been good at planning for the future. Never been good at any of the adult things Jake excelled at. How long have you been planning this? I asked. Since Dad had his heart attack last year, Jake said honestly. That's when I realized how unprepared this family was for the future. Someone had to step up and handle the adult decisions. And you just decided that someone was you? Who else was it going to be, Sarah? The question hung in the air between us. We both knew the answer. You could have talked to me about it, I said, finally. Would it have changed anything? Would you have suddenly developed the money to maintain this property? I could have tried. How? By getting a second job? By going back to school at 32? By magically transforming into someone responsible with money? He shook his head. Sarah, I love you, but you are who you are. And who you are is not someone who can handle this kind of responsibility. Each word was like a knife, precise and cutting. The worst part was that Jake didn't sound angry or cruel. He sounded like he was stating obvious facts. My inadequacy was so apparent it wasn't worth getting emotional about. So what now? I just accept it? You accept reality. You accept that sometimes adults have to make hard decisions for the good of the family. You accept that this house is better off in my hands than split between us. And if I don't accept it? Jake straightened up from the car. Then you make Christmas dinner awkward for everyone and accomplish nothing. The papers are signed, Sarah. It's done. He walked back toward the house, then stopped and turned around. For what it's worth, I really do think this is better for everyone, including you. You'll understand that eventually. Then he went inside, leaving me alone in the driveway.
I couldn't go back in the house. I just couldn't. So I drove around for a while, trying to process what had just happened. I kept thinking about little things. How Jake had said, pack your things, like I was some kind of squatter. How he'd called me dead weight. How he'd laid out all my financial failures, like evidence in a court case. But I also kept thinking about the practical stuff. He wasn't wrong about the money. I really couldn't afford to maintain a house like that. I really didn't have any savings or investments or retirement plan. I really was living paycheck to paycheck, and had been for years. Was this really about protecting the family? Or was it about Jake finally getting to prove he was the successful one, the responsible one, the one who deserved everything? I ended up at my best friend Michelle's house. She was still in her pajamas. Her family does Christmas morning, not Christmas dinner, and took one look at my face and pulled me inside. "What happened?" she asked, leading me to her couch. I told her everything, the whole story, from the briefcase to the legal papers to Jake's casual explanation of why I didn't deserve to inherit my family home. Michelle listened without interrupting, her expression getting darker and darker. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "That's fucked up," she said finally. "Is it though? He's not wrong about the money stuff. I really can't afford—" "Stop!" Michelle cut me off. "Stop defending him." "I'm not defending him. I'm trying to understand if maybe he has a point." "Sarah, listen to me." Michelle grabbed my hands. "Your brother just cut you out of your inheritance on Christmas Day without discussing it with you first, and he did it in the cruelest way possible. That's not financial planning. That's emotional abuse. But nothing. Let me ask you something. If he was really concerned about your financial well-being, why didn't he offer to help you get on your feet? Why didn't he suggest putting the house in a trust that would benefit both of you? Why didn't he at least talk to you about options before making this decision unilaterally?" I didn't have an answer for that. I'll tell you why. Because this isn't about protecting you or the family. This is about Jake getting what he wants and using your financial situation as an excuse to take it. You think he planned this?
I think your brother saw an opportunity to inherit the whole house instead of half a house, and he took it. Everything else is just justification. The idea made my stomach hurt, but it also made sense. Jake had always been competitive, even as kids. He had to be the best at everything, had to win every game, had to prove he was smarter and more capable than everyone else. Maybe this was just another way for him to win. "So, what do I do?" I asked. "You fight it," Michelle said immediately. "You get a lawyer. You challenge the transfer. You make his life difficult until he backs down." "With what money? You heard what he said about my finances. There are lawyers who work on contingency. There are legal aid services. Sarah, you can't just roll over and let him steal your inheritance. But what if he's right? What if I really can't handle it?" Michelle looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "Are you serious right now? Sarah, you've been taking care of yourself for over a decade. You pay your bills, you show up to work, you maintain relationships. You're not some helpless child who needs her big brother to make decisions for her." "I'm not exactly successful, though." "So what? Success isn't just about money. You're a good person. You're kind and funny, and you care about people. You volunteer at the animal shelter on weekends. You take care of your elderly neighbor's cat when she's sick. You remember everyone's birthday and send handwritten cards. Those things matter too. They don't pay property taxes, though." "Neither does being an asshole," Michelle shot back, "but Jake seems to think his money gives him the right to be one." We talked for another hour, going around and around about what I should do. Michelle was convinced I should fight it legally, but every time I thought about going up against Jake with his law firm connections and his MBA and his $400,000 house, I felt sick. What if I challenged it and lost? What if I spent money I didn't have on lawyers and ended up with nothing anyway? What if Jake got angry and convinced my parents to cut me off entirely? "You're scared," Michelle said. "Of course I'm scared." "No, I mean you're scared of him. You're scared of Jake." I started to deny it, then stopped. Because she was right. I was scared of Jake. I'd been scared of him my whole life, in a way. Scared of disappointing him, scared of not measuring up, scared of proving that he was right about me being the family failure. "He's always been the smart one," I said quietly, "the successful one. What if he really does know better than me?" "Sarah, smart people can be cruel. Successful people can be selfish. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." Michelle leaned forward.
Your brother might be intelligent and financially successful, but that doesn't give him the right to make major life decisions for you without your input. But stop. Just stop with the but. There is no but here. What Jake did was wrong, full stop. He betrayed your trust, he manipulated your parents, and he humiliated you at Christmas dinner. None of your financial struggles justify that. I knew she was right. I knew it in my bones. But knowing something is wrong and being able to do something about it are two very different things. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the dinner conversation, trying to figure out when Jake had stopped seeing me as his sister and started seeing me as a problem to solve. Had it been gradual, or had there been a specific moment when he decided I wasn't worth including in the family's future? The next morning, I called my parents. Mom answered, and her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying. "Oh, honey," she said when she heard my voice. "I'm so sorry about yesterday. I had no idea Jake was going to. We didn't know he meant." "What exactly did you think he meant when he said he was handling the estate planning?" There was a long pause. "I thought he was just organizing things, making sure the paperwork was in order. He showed us these articles about probate court and how expensive it can be, and he said if we transferred the house to him now, it would save everyone a lot of trouble later." "And you didn't think to ask what would happen to me?" Another pause, longer this time. He said he'd discussed it with you. He said you'd agreed it made the most sense." My heart sank. Of course Jake had lied to them. Of course he'd made it seem like this was all my idea. "Mom, I never talked to Jake about any of this. I had no idea Jake was planning any of this until he announced it at dinner." "Oh my God." Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. We would never have signed those papers if we'd known you didn't know. Can you undo it? Can you get the house back?" I don't know. Jake said it was all legal, all official. He said once it was done, it was done. But you were tricked into signing. That has to count for something. "I don't know, honey. I don't know anything about legal things. That's why we trusted Jake to handle it." I could hear Dad in the background asking what was wrong. Mom explained what I'd told her, and I heard Dad swear loudly. "Put me on speaker," I said. "Sarah?" Dad's voice was tight with anger. "Is this true? Jake told us you'd agreed to this." "I never agreed to anything, Dad. I didn't even know Jake was planning any of this until he announced it at dinner."
"That son of a bitch," Dad muttered. "I knew something felt wrong about the whole thing. He was so pushy about getting us to sign, said it had to be done before the end of the year for tax reasons." "What tax reasons?" I asked. "Hell if I know. He threw around a bunch of legal terms and said we needed to trust him because he's the expert." "Can we call him? Can we ask him to reverse it?" There was silence on both ends of the phone. "We can try," Mom said finally. "But Sarah, he seemed so sure yesterday that this was the right thing. Even after you left, he kept explaining why it made sense. He showed us numbers and projections, and I don't understand most of it, but it sounded very official." "He manipulated you," I said. "He lied to you about talking to me, and then he manipulated you into signing away your house." "It's still our house," Dad said, but he didn't sound convinced. "We can still live here." "Until you can't. Until Jake decides you're too expensive to maintain, or until he wants to sell, or until he gets married and wants his wife to redecorate." My voice was getting louder, more panicked. "Don't you see? You have no legal rights to your own home anymore." The silence stretched on and on. "We'll call him," Mom said finally. "We'll ask him to explain everything again. And if he won't change it back, then we'll figure something out." But I could hear in her voice that she didn't really believe that. Jake had always been persuasive, especially with our parents. He'd convinced them this was the right thing to do once. He'd probably convince them again. I spent the next 3 days researching property law online, trying to understand if there was any way to challenge what Jake had done. The more I read, the more depressed I got. It seemed like once my parents had signed the transfer voluntarily, there wasn't much anyone could do about it. Even if they'd been misled about some of the details, they had signed willingly.
The only potential avenue I could find was something called undue influence. Basically, if someone in a position of trust manipulates vulnerable people into making decisions against their best interests. But proving that would be incredibly difficult, especially since Jake hadn't technically lied about the facts. He just omitted certain details. On Thursday, Jake called me. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "Do we?" "Mom and Dad are upset. They're talking about trying to reverse the transfer." "Good. Maybe they're finally seeing what you really did." "What I really did was protect this family's assets from probate court and estate taxes that would have cost us tens of thousands of dollars." His voice was patient, like he was explaining something to a child. "But now they're second-guessing themselves because you're making this emotional instead of logical." "It is emotional, Jake. This is our family home." "It's a piece of property with significant financial implications. And if Mom and Dad try to reverse this transfer now, it's going to cost everyone money and accomplish nothing." "Why would it accomplish nothing?" "Because even if they could get the house back, which is questionable legally, we'd still end up in the same situation when they die. You still wouldn't be able to afford your half. We'd still end up having to sell. The only difference is that we'd wasted money on lawyers in the meantime." I hated how reasonable he sounded. "So what do you want from me?" "I want you to talk to them. I want you to explain that you understand why this was necessary. I want you to help calm them down so we can all move forward as a family." "You want me to lie?" "I want you to be mature about this." The condescension in his voice made my teeth hurt. "And if I don't, then this family is going to tear itself apart over a house, and nobody wins." "The family is already torn apart, Jake. You tore it apart when you decided to cut me out of my inheritance without even discussing it with me." "I made a practical decision based on practical realities." "You made a selfish decision, and you're using my financial problems to justify it." There was a long pause. When Jake spoke again, his voice was colder. "Sarah, let me be very clear about something. This house is mine now. That's not changing, regardless of how you feel about it. The only question is whether we're going to be a family that can move past this, or whether you're going to burn everything down out of spite." "It's not spite, Jake. It's hurt. Then get over it." The bluntness of it knocked the breath out of me. "Get over it?" "Yes, get over it. Life isn't fair. Sometimes people with more resources have to make hard decisions for people with less resources. That's not a personal attack. That's reality. I'm your sister, and I'm trying to take care of my family the best way I know how. If you can't see that, if you can't appreciate that someone is actually thinking about the long-term consequences here, then that's your problem." He hung up before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, shaking with anger and hurt and something else I couldn't name. Then I called Michelle. "I'm going to fight it," I told her. "Good. What changed your mind?" He told me to get over it, like losing my inheritance is something I should just accept because he's better with money than I am. That asshole. "Michelle, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Okay? Am I really as hopeless as Jake thinks I am? Am I really this financial disaster who can't take care of myself?" Michelle was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, do you pay your rent every month?" "Yes." "Do you pay your car payment, your insurance, your utilities?" "Yes, but..." "Do you buy groceries and gas and all the stuff you need to live?" "Yes, but..." "Have you ever defaulted on a loan, filed for bankruptcy, had your car repossessed?" "No." "Then you're not a financial disaster. You're someone who lives paycheck to paycheck, which describes about 60% of Americans. That doesn't make you irresponsible. It makes you normal." "But I don't have savings, and I don't own property, and..." "Sarah, stop. You're a pharmacy technician who makes $38,000 a year. In this economy, the fact that you're keeping your head above water at all is actually pretty impressive. Jake makes 3 times what I make. Jake also had his college paid for by Mom and Dad, got help with his first apartment, and has been building wealth for over a decade. You've been on your own since you were 22. It's not a fair comparison. I hadn't thought about that. Jake had gotten so much help from our parents over the years, help I'd never asked for, because I'd been too proud, or maybe too scared of being told no. Even if that's true, I said, I still can't afford to maintain a house like that. Maybe not by yourself, but there are options Jake never bothered to explore. You could rent out part of it. You could take in a roommate. You could get a reverse mortgage when mom and dad are gone. Hell, you could sell your half to Jake for fair market value instead of just getting cut out entirely. You think he'd go for any of that? I think he'd go for whatever costs him the least money. Right now, he gets a $400,000 house for free. If you force him to actually negotiate, he might be more reasonable. Or he might dig in and make everything worse. Sarah, everything is already worse. He's already taken your inheritance. He's already humiliated you in front of your parents. He's already told you to get over it. What exactly are you afraid of losing at this point? She had a point. I'd already lost everything. What was left to protect? I'll need a lawyer, I said. I'll help you find one. My cousin went through a family trust dispute a few years ago. I'll get the name of her attorney. I can't afford... We'll figure it out. There are payment plans, legal aid, contingency arrangements. Don't let money stop you from fighting for what's right. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. The lawyer Michelle's cousin recommended was a woman named Patricia Hernandez. Her office was small and cramped, nothing like the fancy downtown firm where Jake worked, but she listened to my story without interrupting and took detailed notes. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and frowned. "This is tricky," she said. "Your parents did sign the transfer voluntarily. The fact that they were misled about your knowledge of the situation is problematic, but it might not be enough to invalidate the transfer." My heart sank. So there's nothing I can do? I didn't say that. There are a few potential avenues to explore. She flipped through her notes. First, we need to determine exactly what your parents were told and what they understood when they signed. If your brother made specific false statements about your consent, that could be grounds for fraud. Would that be enough to reverse it? Possibly, but even if we can't reverse the transfer, we might be able to negotiate a settlement. Your brother might prefer to pay you a cash settlement rather than risk a protracted legal battle that could get expensive. How much would a settlement be? Hard to say without knowing more about the property value and your brother's financial situation, but you'd be looking at significantly less than half the house value, maybe $50,000 to $75,000. It wasn't what I'd hoped for, but it was better than nothing. How much would this cost me? I can work on a contingency basis for something like this. You wouldn't pay attorney fees unless we recover money for you. But there would be court costs, filing fees, other expenses that you'd need to cover upfront, probably $3,000 to $5,000. I felt my stomach drop. I don't have $3,000 to $5,000. Do you have any family members who might be willing to help? I almost laughed. The only family member with money is the one I'm fighting. Patricia nodded sympathetically. Let me make some calls. There are sometimes legal aid organizations that help with family disputes, especially when elderly parents might have been taken advantage of. I can also talk to some colleagues about possibly reducing the upfront costs. And if none of that works, then we explore other options. Sometimes just having a lawyer send a letter is enough to get people to negotiate. Your brother might not want the hassle of a legal fight, even if he thinks he'll win. I left her office feeling cautiously optimistic for the first time in days. It wasn't much, but it was something. I wasn't completely powerless. While Patricia worked on the legal side, I decided to try talking to my parents again. Maybe if I could get them to understand what Jake really did, they'd be willing to support my fight to reverse it. I drove over to the house on Saturday morning. Dad was in the garage, tinkering with his workbench like he always did when he was upset. He looked up when I came in, and his expression was pained. "How are you holding up, kiddo?" "I've been better. How are you and Mom?" Dad set down the screwdriver and rubbed his face. Confused, angry, guilty as hell. He looked at me directly. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. We never should have signed those papers without talking to you first. Jake told you I'd agreed to it. He did, But that should have been a red flag right there. Since when do you agree to anything without asking a million questions first? Dad's attempt at a smile fell flat. We should have known something was wrong. Have you talked to him since then? Oh, we've talked to him. He came over yesterday to explain things again, spent 2 hours showing us spreadsheets and tax documents and legal precedents, made it sound like we'd be idiots to try to change anything now. Do you believe him? Dad was quiet for a long moment. I believe he's telling us what he thinks we need to hear to keep us from causing him problems. That was more direct than I expected. What does Mom think?
Mom feels terrible. She's been crying on and off since Christmas. She keeps saying she failed you as a mother. She didn't fail me. You both got manipulated by someone you trusted. That doesn't make it better, Sarah. We're your parents. We're supposed to protect you, not hand over your inheritance to your brother because he's more persuasive than we are. I could see the guilt eating at him, and it made my chest tight. Dad, I'm going to fight this. I found a lawyer who thinks there might be options. His face brightened slightly. Really? What kind of options? Maybe fraud, since Jake lied about me agreeing to it. Maybe undue influence. At minimum, maybe a settlement. What do you need from us? I need you to be honest about exactly what Jake told you and when. I need you to be willing to testify about what you understood when you signed the papers. Dad nodded immediately. Of course, whatever you need. And I need you to understand that this might get ugly. Jake's not going to take this well. He might try to turn you against me or threaten to cut contact or... Sarah? Dad's voice was firm. Jake manipulated us into giving away your inheritance. He lied to us about your consent. He humiliated you at Christmas dinner in our own home. His jaw was set in a way I recognized from childhood. It was his stubborn face. If he wants to make this ugly, that's on him. We're not going to abandon you to protect his feelings. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until we see how this plays out. Dad picked up his screwdriver again, then set it down. Sarah, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you really think Jake planned this? Do you think he deliberately set out to cheat you out of your inheritance? I'd been wrestling with that question for days. I think Jake saw an opportunity to get what he wanted and convinced himself it was best for everyone. I don't think he set out to hurt me specifically, but I also don't think he cared whether he hurt me or not. He considered this. That might be worse than if he'd planned it. What do you mean? If he'd planned it, at least that would mean he thought about you enough to consider you a threat or an obstacle, but if he just didn't consider you at all, if you were so irrelevant to his plans that he could casually write you off, Dad shook his head. That's not the Jake I raised. Maybe it's not the Jake you raised. Maybe it's the Jake that success and money turned him into. We went inside to talk to Mom, who was in the kitchen making what looked like her 4th pot of coffee that morning. When she saw me, her eyes immediately filled with tears. Oh, honey, I've been so worried about you. I'm okay, Mom. I'm going to fight this. She pulled back to look at me. Are you sure? Jake seemed so certain yesterday that it would be expensive and pointless. Jake is trying to scare you into giving up. That doesn't mean he's right. Mom glanced at Dad, who nodded encouragingly. What do you need us to do? I explained the same things I'd told Dad, about being honest with the lawyer, about potentially having to testify, about Jake probably not taking this well. I can handle Jake, said Mom, with more steel in her voice than I'd heard in years. What I can't handle is knowing that we let him steal your inheritance while we sat there and smiled. You didn't know. We should have known. We should have asked more questions. We should have insisted on talking to you before signing anything. Mom's hands were shaking slightly. Sarah, this house has been in our family for 30 years. Your father and I always assumed it would be split between you and Jake equally. We never, ever intended for you to be cut out. I know that. Do you? Because I keep thinking about all the times over the years when Jake would make those little comments about your finances, about how you needed to be more responsible, about how you were struggling,
And we let him. We didn't defend you the way we should have. I thought about all those family dinners where Jake would ask pointed questions about my savings account or suggest I should look into more lucrative career options. I always assumed he was just being a concerned big brother. Now I wondered if he'd been building a case. It's not your fault he manipulated all of us, I said. Maybe not, but it's our fault we made it so easy for him. That afternoon, Patricia called with an update. She'd spoken to a legal aid organization that was willing to cover some of the upfront costs in exchange for a percentage of any eventual recovery. It wasn't ideal, but it meant I could actually afford to pursue this. I'm also going to send your brother a letter. Nothing aggressive, just a formal notice that we're reviewing the property transfer and would like to discuss a resolution. Sometimes that's enough to get people to the negotiating table. And if it's not, then we file a formal complaint and see how serious he is about fighting this. How long does something like this usually take? If we can negotiate a settlement, maybe a few months. If it goes to court, could be a year or more. The thought of fighting Jake for over a year was exhausting, but I'd come this far. Okay, send the letter. I'll draft it today and get it out Monday. In the meantime, I need you to put together a timeline of everything you remember about your family's discussions of estate planning over the past few years. Anytime Jake mentioned inheritance, wills, property taxes, anything related to your parents' assets, even small comments could be relevant. I spent the rest of the weekend going through old text messages and emails trying to reconstruct Jake's gradual campaign to position himself as the family's financial expert. It was depressing how clear the pattern was once I started looking for it. There was the time 2 years ago when he'd sent the family an article about probate court horror stories. The time last year when he'd casually mentioned that property taxes on the house had gone up. The time 6 months ago when he'd brought up how complicated inheritance law was getting. Each individual conversation had seemed innocent, even helpful, but taken together, they painted a picture of someone systematically laying groundwork for what he did at Christmas.
Jake called me Tuesday morning, 3 hours after Patricia's letter would have been delivered to his office. "What the fuck is this?" he said, without preamble. "Hello to you too, Jake." "Don't play games with me, Sarah. I just got a letter from some lawyer claiming I defrauded mom and dad. Are you seriously going to try to sue me?" "I'm seriously going to try to get back what you stole from me." "I didn't steal anything. The house was transferred legally with mom and dad's full consent. After you lied to them about me agreeing to it. I told them what they needed to hear to make a rational decision about their estate." The casual admission hung in the air between us. He'd just confessed to lying, and he didn't even seem to realize it. "Jake, do you hear yourself right now? You just admitted that you lied to our parents to manipulate them into giving you their house. I simplified a complex situation to help them make the best decision for the family. You lied. I managed the information they were given so they could focus on what really mattered." It was like talking to a politician. Every admission of wrongdoing got instantly reframed as responsible leadership. What really mattered to who? You? To the family. "Sarah, if you drag this into court, it's going to cost everyone money and accomplish nothing. You still won't be able to afford the house. You'll still end up having to sell your portion. The only difference is that lawyers will get rich and the family will be torn apart." The family is already torn apart. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to. You could transfer the house back to mom and dad. You could agree to split it equally when they're gone. You could acknowledge that what you did was wrong and fix it. I can't do that. Why not? Another long pause. Because it would set a precedent. Because it would send the message that financial decisions should be made based on emotions instead of logic. Because it would be irresponsible. There it was again, the elaborate justification system that let Jake convince himself he was the hero of this story. Or, I said,
because you want the house and you don't want to share it. That's not what this is about. But he didn't sound sure anymore. For the first time since Christmas, Jake sounded like he was questioning himself. Think about it. Really think about it. If our situations were reversed, if I was the one with money and success, and I cut you out of your inheritance because you were struggling financially, how would you feel? That's different. How is it different?
Because I would never let myself get into the financial situation you're in. And there it was. The truth underneath all the justifications and explanations. Jake didn't think I deserved to inherit the house because he thought I was a failure. He thought my financial struggles were a moral failing that disqualified me from family wealth. Wow, I said quietly. Sarah, no, I get it now. This isn't about protecting the family or being financially responsible. This is about you thinking you're better than me. This is about you thinking that because I don't make as much money as you do, I don't deserve the same consideration as a family member. That's not, it is, though. You just said it. You said you would never let yourself get into my financial situation, like it's some kind of moral choice I made, like I chose to make $38,000 a year instead of 3 times that. I didn't mean, yes, you did. You meant exactly that. I was surprised by how calm I sounded. And you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm not as smart or successful or financially responsible as you are, but I'm still your sister. I'm still mom and dad's daughter, and I still deserve to be treated like a member of this family. I hung up before he could respond. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork and family phone calls. Patricia filed a formal complaint alleging fraud and undue influence. Jake's lawyers responded with a motion to dismiss, claiming the complaint was frivolous and threatening to seek sanctions against me for filing it. That's normal, Patricia assured me. They're trying to scare you into dropping it. The fact that they're being so aggressive actually suggests they're worried. My parents were called in for depositions. Mom came home from hers looking exhausted and shaky. They made me feel like I was the one who'd done something wrong. Jake's lawyer kept asking why I hadn't insisted on talking to you before signing, why I had trusted Jake to handle everything, why I was changing my story now. What did you tell them? The truth. That Jake told us you'd agreed to it and that we never would have signed if we'd known you hadn't been consulted. Mom sat down heavily at the kitchen table. But Sarah, they made it sound like we were unreliable witnesses, like we were confused old people who didn't understand what we were signing. That's their strategy. They want to make it seem like you're not credible. Well, it's working. I feel like an idiot. Dad's deposition went better, probably because he was angrier and less easily intimidated, but the whole process was clearly taking a toll on both of them. I hate that you're having to go through this because of me, I told them. You're not making us go through this. Jake is making us go through this. He's the one who created this mess. But I could see the stress wearing on them. Mom was losing weight and sleeping poorly. Dad was spending more and more time in his garage, avoiding the house where everything reminded him of the family conflict. Jake, meanwhile, had apparently decided that the best defense was a good offense. He started calling Mom and Dad regularly, not to apologize or negotiate, but to reinforce his position that the lawsuit was frivolous and destructive. He keeps saying we're being manipulated by your lawyer, Mom told me after one particularly difficult call. He says Patricia is filling our heads with unrealistic expectations and that we're going to end up spending all our savings on legal fees for nothing. Do you believe him?
I don't know what to believe anymore. Everyone keeps telling us different things. I could feel the situation slipping away from me. Jake was doing what he'd always done, using his position as the successful, knowledgeable one to undermine everyone else's confidence in their own judgment. 3 months into the legal battle, Patricia called with disappointing news. Jake's lawyers are offering a settlement, she said. $25,000. That's it? It's better than nothing, and honestly, it might be the best we can get. The judge seems skeptical about our fraud claims, and proving undue influence is going to be very difficult. What about the property value? The house is worth $400,000.
But your brother is right about one thing. You can't afford to maintain it. His lawyers are arguing that even if you inherited half, you'd be forced to sell immediately, which would net you maybe $60,000 or $70,000 after taxes and fees. So $25,000 isn't completely unreasonable as a settlement. It felt completely unreasonable to me. $25,000 for a lifetime of expectations, for the security of knowing I'd always have a place to call home, for the simple dignity of being treated equally by my own family. What if we go to trial? We could win more, but we could also lose everything. Trials are unpredictable, and your brother has excellent lawyers. There's a real risk that we could spend another year fighting this and end up with nothing. What do you think I should do? I think you should seriously consider the settlement. It's not fair, and it's not what you deserve, but it's something, and it would let you avoid more months of family conflict. That night, I called Michelle to talk through the decision. $25,000 is insulting, she said immediately, but it's also $25,000 more than I have now. That's not the point. The point is that your brother manipulated your parents into giving him a $400,000 house, and now he wants to throw you a few crumbs to make the problem go away? Patricia thinks it might be the best I can get. Patricia doesn't have to live with your family for the rest of your life. You do. I hadn't thought about it that way. If I took the settlement, would I be able to sit at future family dinners knowing that Jake had essentially bought me off? Would I be able to watch him hosting Christmas in my childhood home, knowing that I'd accepted being cut out for the price of a used car? But if I turn it down and lose at trial, I get nothing. If you turn it down and lose at trial, at least you fought for what was right. At least you didn't let him get away with it completely. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who'd be out the $25,000. You're right. I'm not. And I can't make this decision for you. Michelle was quiet for a moment. But I can tell you that I've watched you beat yourself up for years about not being successful enough, not making enough money, not measuring up to Jake. And now you have a chance to stand up for yourself, to prove that you won't be pushed around just because you're not rich. That's worth more than $25,000. What if I'm wrong? What if Jake really was trying to protect the family, and I'm just being vindictive?
Sarah, do you honestly believe that? After everything he said and done? I thought about Jake telling me to get over it. I thought about him admitting he'd managed the information our parents received. I thought about him saying he'd never let himself get into my financial situation, like my struggles were a character flaw. No, I said. I don't believe that. Then fight. I called Patricia the next morning and told her to reject the settlement offer. Are you sure? She asked. This is probably going to be their best offer. I'm sure. If I'm going to lose, I want to lose fighting, not because I gave up. Okay, I'll let them know. But Sarah, you need to be prepared for this to get nastier. Settlement negotiations are one thing, but once we're heading toward trial, both sides are going to start playing hardball. She was right. Over the next few weeks, the legal maneuvering became increasingly aggressive. Jake's lawyers demanded financial records going back 5 years, apparently trying to prove that I was such a financial disaster that inheriting property would be harmful to me. They subpoenaed my employment records, my credit report, my bank statements. They're trying to humiliate you, explained Patricia. They want to make you feel so exposed and uncomfortable that you'll give up. The strategy was working. Having my entire financial life scrutinized and picked apart was mortifying. Jake's lawyers found every late payment, every overdraft fee, every month when I'd had to choose between groceries and car insurance. They found the time I'd borrowed $500 from mom and dad to fix my transmission. They found the credit card I'd maxed out during a particularly rough period 2 years ago. All of it was true, and all of it was humiliating, and all of it was completely irrelevant to whether Jake had the right to steal my inheritance. But the worst part was the effect it was having on my parents. The constant legal pressure, the detailed examination of family finances, the increasingly hostile communication from Jake.
It was all wearing them down. "Maybe we should just let this go," Mom said one evening when I stopped by. She looked older than she had 6 months ago, more fragile. Maybe Jake was right that this would tear the family apart. The family was already torn apart, I reminded her. I'm just trying to put it back together in a way that's fair to everyone. But what if we lose? What if we go through all this and end up with nothing anyway? Then at least we'll know we tried. And what if Jake stops talking to us? What if this ruins our relationship with him permanently? I could see the fear in her eyes. She was terrified of losing one child in the process of trying to help the other. "Mom, Jake is the one who chose to lie and manipulate instead of having an honest conversation about the inheritance. Jake is the one who's refusing to negotiate or compromise. If the relationship is ruined, it's because he's choosing to ruin it, not because we're trying to make things fair. I know that. I know you're right. But knowing you're right and being able to handle the consequences are two different things." "What are you saying?" Mom looked at Dad, who'd been unusually quiet during this conversation. He nodded slightly, like they'd already discussed what she was about to say. "We're saying that if you want to keep fighting, we'll support you. But we need you to understand that we might not be strong enough to see this through to the end." My heart sank. "You want me to drop it?" "We want you to make whatever decision you can live with," Dad said. "But we also want you to know that this is killing your mother. The stress, the family conflict, the constant legal pressure. She's not sleeping, she's barely eating, she cries every time Jake calls." I looked at Mom, really looked at her, and saw how thin she'd gotten, how tired she looked. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. "I never wanted this to hurt you. I know, honey, and you're not the one hurting us. Jake is the one hurting us. But that doesn't change the fact that we're being hurt." We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Dad spoke up. "Sarah, what would it take for you to feel like you could walk away from this?" "I don't know. Maybe if Jake acknowledged what he did was wrong. Maybe if he apologized or agreed to some kind of compensation that felt fair. Or just, I don't know, treated me like I mattered. And if he won't do any of those things?" I thought about it. "Then I guess I have to decide what's more important, proving I'm right or protecting what's left of our family." It was the hardest question I'd ever had to answer. That weekend, I took a long drive to think. I ended up at the lake where our family used to go camping when Jake and I were kids. I sat on the old dock, watching the water and trying to figure out what mattered most. On one hand, this was about more than money. It was about being treated with respect and dignity by my own family. It was about not letting Jake's financial success give him the right to make unilateral decisions about my life. It was about proving that I mattered, that I was worth fighting for. My phone rang. It was Jake. "Hi," I said, not sure why I answered. "Hi." His voice was different, tired, less confrontational than usual. "I'm at the lake, at our old camping spot." I looked around, confused. "What?" "I'm about 50 yards down the shore from you. I saw your car." I turned and saw him walking toward me along the water's edge. He looked as tired as he sounded. "Are you following me?" I asked when he got close enough. "No, I come here sometimes when I need to think." He gestured toward the dock. "Mind if I sit?" I shrugged. "It's not my dock." He sat down next to me, leaving several feet between us. We stared at the water in silence for a while. "This is fucked up," he said finally. "Yeah, it is. I never wanted it to go this far." "Then why didn't you stop it?" Jake picked up a pebble and threw it into the water. "Because I thought I was right. Because I thought you'd eventually see that this was the best thing for everyone. And now? Now, I think maybe I was wrong about some things." "Like what?" "Like, maybe I should have talked to you first. Maybe I should have explored other options. Maybe I was so focused on solving the problem that I forgot you were a person, not just a problem to solve." We sat in silence again. A family of ducks swam by, completely unbothered by our presence. "I'm sorry," Jake said quietly. "For what? Specifically?" "For lying to Mom and Dad about you agreeing to the transfer, for humiliating you at Christmas dinner, for telling you to get over it." He paused. for treating you like you didn't matter. The apology felt real, but it also felt incomplete. Are you sorry for taking the house? Jake was quiet for a long time. I'm sorry for how I took the house. I'm sorry for not including you in the decision, but Sarah, I still think it was the right practical choice. Even knowing how much it hurt me? Even knowing that, because sometimes doing the right thing hurts people, and someone has to be willing to make the hard decisions. And there it was. Jake was sorry for his methods, but not for his goal. He was sorry for hurting me, but not for cutting me out. So what now? I asked. I don't know. I want to fix this, but I don't know how. I can't give you half the house. I've already restructured my finances around owning it outright, but maybe we can work out something better than what my lawyers offered. Like what? Maybe $50,000 instead of $25,000. Maybe a percentage of any future sale. Maybe some kind of arrangement where you could stay in the house if you ever needed to. He looked at me directly. I'm not trying to cut you out of the family, Sarah. I'm trying to protect the family's assets. Those things aren't mutually exclusive, Jake. You could protect the family's assets and still treat me fairly. How? By giving you half a house you can't afford to maintain? By forcing mom and dad out of their home when you have to sell your portion? By letting sentiment override practical considerations? By treating me like a full member of this family instead of a charity case who needs you to make decisions for her? Jake threw another pebble, harder this time. Maybe I do think I know better than you about financial things. Maybe I do think you're not equipped to handle major property ownership. But that doesn't mean I don't love you or want what's best for you. It just means you want what you think is best for me, whether I agree or not. Sometimes family means trusting people to make their own decisions, even when you think those decisions are wrong. Sometimes family means letting people fail on their own terms, instead of preventing them from even trying. We sat there watching the water until the sun started to set. Finally, Jake stood up. I should go, he said. But Sarah, think about what I said, about trying to work out something better. This doesn't have to destroy our family. It already has destroyed our family. The only question is whether we can build something new from what's left. Jake walked away without responding. Update. Posted 6 months later. So, a lot of people have been asking for an update on the situation, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to share it. But I've gotten so many messages from people going through similar family conflicts that I decided it might be helpful. The short version is, we settled. Not in court, but through family mediation. After that conversation at the lake, Jake called and suggested we try to work something out without the lawyers. I was skeptical, but my parents were so desperate for any kind of resolution that I agreed to try. We ended up in mediation with a neutral third party who specialized in family conflicts. It took 4 sessions over 2 months, but we eventually reached an agreement that everyone could live with, if not love. Here's what we worked out. Jake keeps ownership of the house, but I get 15% of any future sale proceeds. I have the right to stay in the house for up to 6 months if I'm ever homeless or in financial crisis. Jake pays me $40,000 over the next 3 years, $15,000 now, then $12.5K annually. Most importantly, Jake wrote a formal letter acknowledging that he should have included me in the decision-making process and apologizing for how he handled the situation. It's not perfect, it's not equal, but it's something. The money has made a real difference in my life. I was able to pay off my credit card debt, build an emergency fund, and even start contributing to a retirement account. For the first time in my adult life, I'm not living paycheck to paycheck. More importantly, the mediation process forced all of us to have honest conversations about family dynamics that had been festering for years. Jake admitted that he'd always seen me as the irresponsible sibling and had been unconsciously preparing to take over family financial decisions for years. I admitted that I'd been so intimidated by his success that I'd never even tried to get involved in family financial planning. Our parents admitted that they'd enabled some of these dynamics by always turning to Jake for financial advice and always worrying about my money situation instead of helping me improve it. It wasn't comfortable, but it was necessary.
Jake and I aren't close the way we were as kids. I don't think we ever will be again. But we're civil, and we can be in the same room without everything exploding. He still thinks he was mostly right about the practical aspects of the situation. I still think he was mostly wrong about the human aspects. But we've agreed to disagree and focus on moving forward. The hardest part has been accepting that some betrayals can't be completely forgiven or forgotten. Jake violated my trust in a way that changed how I see him permanently. He's my brother, and I love him, but I'll never again assume that he has my best interests at heart. But maybe that's okay. Maybe part of growing up is realizing that family members are just people, with all the selfishness and blind spots that implies. Maybe the goal isn't to have perfect relationships, but to have honest ones. A lot of people have asked if I regret fighting the transfer instead of just accepting it. The answer's complicated. Fighting it was expensive, emotionally and financially. It put my parents through hell and probably permanently damaged my relationship with Jake. But it also taught me that I'm stronger than I thought I was. It taught me that I'm worth fighting for, even when the fight is hard and messy and painful. It taught me that sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything in order to save what really matters. Would I do it again? I honestly don't know. But I'm glad I did it once. For anyone going through something similar, here's what I learned. Family mediation is worth trying before litigation if everyone's willing to participate. Document everything and get legal advice early, even if you don't end up going to court. Be prepared for the process to change your family relationships permanently. Don't let anyone convince you that money isn't worth fighting about. It's not about the money. It's about being treated with respect. Sometimes the best resolution isn't justice, it's closure. The house still doesn't feel like home when I visit. Maybe it never will again. But I realized that home isn't a building anyway. It's the feeling of being valued and respected by the people who matter to you. I'm working on building that feeling in other places with other people. It's harder than I expected, but also more rewarding. And who knows, maybe someday Jake and I will figure out how to be siblings again, instead of just people who share parents and childhood memories. Maybe not. But either way, I'll be okay. Thanks to everyone who reached out with support and similar stories. It meant more than you know. TLDR, fought my brother in court after he secretly transferred our family home to himself. We eventually settled through mediation, got some money, got an apology, lost a relationship. Learned that standing up for yourself is worth it even when it's messy and painful and doesn't end the way you hoped. Edit. I'm going to turn off notifications for this post because some of the private messages I'm getting are intense. For those asking about specific legal strategies, please consult with an attorney in your area because family law varies significantly by state. For those suggesting I should have done X or Y differently, I appreciate the input, but I'm at peace with how things turned out. For those sharing their own family drama stories, I hear you and I'm sorry you're going through it. Take care of yourselves.